Live. Welcome, y'all. We're just live. We're having a conversation this evening about courtship and dating. I have my longtime friend, brother minister, Jehan Shamsiden. Welcome to the LISA Unfiltered, Jehan.
Glad to be here.
So glad to have you. Now, I hope I'm not affecting anything. Okay, so we were talking about courtship versus dating. What's the difference?
Dating is considered more loosely, without a lot of times without restrictions. Is more of a modern thing. Dating.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of a modern thing that you have in this day and time, and probably within the last maybe 50, 60 years.
Yes.
And as time went on, you got more into dating, whereas opposed to courtship is something that was more family oriented. That's something that we did as a community, you know, back within the last century or so. It's called courtships.
Right.
Courtship is more family foundation. It's more two people coming together with a common goal, and the goal is to become one with each other as far as marriage and whatnot. In today's society, dating is just, you can go out and you date somebody, meaning that there's really no commitment, there's no long-term goals a lot of times with dating. And that goes to say with today's society and the way today is structured, the way this society is structured, is dating is accepted nowadays more or less than what it was probably the last few decades ago. It wasn't accepted like it is now.
I meant to cut this phone off. I mean the notifications, excuse me. But yeah, I have to agree on that one. Um, you know what I was talking to you about earlier, how you grew up Muslim and I grew up in the Church of God in Christ, and both of those um, religious constructs are they're very sacred and a tight regimented lifestyle, so to speak. I mean, and like I often said, cursing and foul language wasn't commonplace in our household. We didn't call each other the N word, none of that stuff, you know. And so, how do you think that affected you in getting married? How old were you when you got married? The first time.
Uh, the first time I was 25. I was 25 when I got married, and from my upbringing, I used that as a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as what I was looking for and going about, asking that person that I wanted to marry, how to go about doing it. I used my family, my father and my mother as examples.
Mm-hmm.
They were my example. My grandmother, my grandfather, they were examples as to how to go about, going into making that next step. Oh, excuse me, making that next step into marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And because what you want, you don't want to be courting somebody or as they call it nowadays, dating.
Mm-hmm.
For long periods of time. There was no, courting is it's not a long courtship.
Right. Yeah.
The ultimate goal is to have a partner, as the scriptures say, have a helpmeet that you can have by your side and for longevity and for family. So when I first got married, I did it, I tried to do it in the manner that I was taught.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the parents and I asked them to marry their daughter. You should get permission. Nowadays, it is basically the total opposite. Whereas most people when they date, they don't, they may meet the parents, but they don't necessarily get permission or, get the okay of the parents to go ahead and make that next step. Not all the time. Sometimes you do, but nowadays, today's society, they don't push that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't push that narrative.
Yeah. I saw this brother. You might know who he is. He said, "Date as many as you can." You know what I'm saying? He said, "Check them all out. Don't have sex with all of them, but check them out." So, what's your views on that one?
That is a loosely. That's like a loose cannon.
Because you
You know.
can, like they say in church, don't let your good be evil spoken of. If you see with a lot of guys here and there, there's a lot that could be said about that, but it don't seem like in today's society they care much about that.
No, they don't. Today's society is based on that loose kind of attitude, that loose kind of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
where if he says date as many as you can, that's putting yourself out there as immoral, even if you're not doing anything immoral,
Mm-hmm.
but you are doing something immoral because you're not looking. Most of the time, you're not looking for that long term relationship with somebody. If you're just dating, you're dating whoever you don't like what this person says, or you don't see y'all going any further than this. You might not even be giving it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't date as many as you can. That can be shunned upon.
How so?
Especially when you're trying to build, you're trying to build a relationship and a future with somebody.
Or even an image.
Right. Yeah, but they could be, if you're dating 2, 3, 4 people within a certain period of time. How does that look to other people? How will they look at you? How will they look at whoever? How does that make you look? Not you in particular, but how does that make a person look
Me or
on you?
anybody else that did had that lifestyle,
Yeah,
kind of loose, but
right. They
at the
see you with one person, sitting in 6 months later, you with somebody else. You know,
mm-hmm.
even if you're not being, immoral, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it can still be perceived as that.
Yeah. So we don't want our good to be evil spoken of. So
Right.
how who is this? If okay, in today's society, people are not staying in marriages, like they used to. They used to stay regardless. You know, why do you think this? Why do you think that has changed? You know.
Well, there's many reasons why it's changed. It's not no one reason.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the most marriage breakups, it could be cultural. It could be many reasons why. In today's society, they don't push longevity as far as marriage goes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. There's a certain agenda, especially when you're talking about black families.
Mm-hmm.
The marriage rate for black families is real low. The divorce rate is real high.
Mm-hmm.
I think the divorce rate is over 60% with marriages in the black family.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Meaning that 60% of our marriages don't last.
mm-hmm.
And in past times, the main thing that kept us strong and kept us, you know, morally strong, spiritually strong, was that family structure.
Right.
It was, but now that today's society, doesn't even push that. If you look in the media, if you look on TV, if you look, at the schools don't even teach that.
Mm-hmm.
Even up to the college level, they don't teach that. If you look at religious institutions, they don't teach it. They don't teach that marriage, that long term commitment to somebody. So now you got other factors that play into that too. The main thing that when they brought our fathers into slavery was to break up the black family, to break up the family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you had a man and a woman and a two-parent home, the children had a better chance of surviving, even during some of the most harsh conditions.
This is true.
And now, as the generations went on, we are at a point now where basically 1 out of 3 marriages is not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Even over a certain period of time, probably within most times within a 5 to 10 year period, divorce is on the way.
Yeah.
So the main thing is that the breakup of the family. That's how I feel. That it is what you call I ain't gonna say conspiracy, but
systematically done by design.
Very true.
So how do we fix that?
We have to get back to basics. We have to get back to basics, get back to how we were raised before our sojourn here in America. We got to get back culturally to what we were before we had our encounter here in America. America is a cesspool of immorality. Mm-hmm. It doesn't push morality. It doesn't give you that inclination to be right. They don't incline to be right. They're inclined to let you do whatever you want to do. You can do your own thing.
The raunchier, the better.
And then when you find somebody that tries to do right, what do they tell you? They're old. Oh, you're old fashioned. Mm-hmm. We don't do that. We don't do that anymore. We don't. That's what you hear a lot of times. Yeah. So we just got to get back to basics as far as a family structure. Mm-hmm. Instead of just going out, we want to date whoever. A lot of us have been hurt so many times that we've given up. Mm-hmm. The process. A lot of people have given up. You hear that too. You hear a lot of, I don't need no man, or I don't need no woman. I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to be alone. I don't need that.
Well, I've never said that. I've never said that because there's times where one would have definitely been a benefit. However, nobody is worth the peace that I found. But I too married at an early age, and I had the wrong expectations. We were just kids. And so, like I said, being raised a Muslim or in church, they give us the understanding or idea that that's the answer to um, that burn. As the scripture says, it's better to marry than to burn. So they feel like if they get married, they're supposed to know how, this is supposed to solve the problem when they go into a marriage not really knowing what it entails. So.
Yeah. Because when you get into when you're looking for a mate, when you're looking on, you're gonna necessarily be just your future mate. But when you meet somebody, the first thing you see is the physical, and most of us can never get past the physical,
right? Male
or female. You see, you're attracted to that person's physical level. So a lot of us never get past that. We're not trying to get to know the person. You don't know a person until you know what's in their mind, what's in their head. Mm-hmm. Just because somebody looks beautiful on the outside, the interior could be rotten. Yeah. The exterior looks good, but the interior, that's what you gotta try to get to know.
Exactly. I've seen the manifestations of that both ways. Right. Seeing a really beautiful person, they open their mouth and wow, Mm-hmm. So We're trying to keep our spirits pure. But
Right.
I thank you for your time. You promised me 15 minutes. And so I thank you. Is there any other nuggets of wisdom? I'm absolutely enjoying this conversation, as always. You know, you have some depth and some substance and some background. So,
Yeah, I can only, give, what I've learned.
mhm,
If I've learned anything in life, I've learned to, respect our culture and get back to basics in order to make this thing work. We're not never going to have a future until we go back to our past and start looking at our past and how things were structured then. Because right now we have been for centuries. We've been in a war.
mhm,
We've been in a war, and the main thing in war, what the prize in any war is the female. In the wartime, the main thing is most 90% of warriors were men.
mhm,
And when the main purpose of war is to destroy the male, and that's what they've done. They've destroyed the male, and the prize is the female. And that's why you see so much in the media of especially in the black family. You don't see the male figure there anymore. You see the female on
mhm,
TV more. You see the female in business. You see the female doing this and doing that.
mhm.
But you don't see the male figure there. The male figure he's supposed to be the backbone.
Yeah. You know,
But
I've heard a few men state that women are so masculine now. They're so aggressive, and they're looking for these soft females, but soft women are that feminine softness, but women have had to be strong for so long. I think it's kind of hard for some of them to try to get back to that. We had to, um, like you stated earlier, how they moved the fathers out of the homes in order to get certain benefits and things like that. But that wasn't the only thing that came against our family structure, you know.
right, right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, nowadays there's an imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be balanced. There's an imbalance. There's a wobble. There's an imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have an imbalance, you're not. You got a wobble. You can't. You got certain traits that are standing out more than other traits. Like you said this. You seen more masculinity in today's women.
I've heard
That's
one.
because there's.
I've heard more than one man say that. You know,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's true
not necessarily to me. Just talking about women. Although
in general.
I've tried to curb, certain things because I too had to be strong. But like I said, I got married early. And it didn't really last. But I maintained and raised my children to some fine adults. So I'm proud of them, and I'm grateful. That we didn't struggle or suffer, and for a supportive support system. My family was top
Right.
top tier, so I'm grateful for that. But I believe that my foundation, knowing about having a God consciousness and knowing how to pray and have faith, different things worked out. Different, we didn't. It wasn't. It would have been better to have that structure, though. I could see a result in the lack of what should have been, but I'm still grateful. Since it's Black History Month, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but can you tell us about your father and the impact that he had on the city of Flint in the '70s, and how you came up?
Yeah, my father was a very influential figure in my life
Hmm.
and in the community too.
What was his name?
And his Curtis originally name was Curtis Jackson. That was his given name. His family's given name, because we didn't have our original names, since they were taken from us during this period that we endured here in America during slavery. Our original names were taken from us. So his name was Curtis Jackson. He changed his name eventually to Curtis Shamsiden. Yeah, but he was very influential here in Flint, and as a minister in the Nation of Islam. He was very influential as far as business wise. He was the first black tire salesman here in Flint at General Tire, when General Tire was originally on Saginaw Street. And he was very first black salesperson ever in Flint as a tire salesman. That was saying something. Like that was back in the I think it was around in late 60s, early 70s. He came into the Nation of Islam, I believe. I don't know exactly what year, but I believe it was the early 60s. The early 60s was when he came into the nation. He became a minister over in Muskegon. He was a minister there first before he came here to Flint, Michigan. As he was transferred here to Flint to help build up Flint and Muhammad's Mosque. Well, Muhammad's Temple is called Muhammad's Temple then. Muhammad's Temple number 53 on Gillespie Street. And so he was a minister up until 1977. And that's when he resigned in 1977.
You said Gillespie Street, right? What was the address on that building?
402, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was 402 East Gillespie Street.
Okay. The last time I passed that building, there was a big mural painted on the side of it, an eagle and something else. I think it's a part of the art project in Flint somehow.
I believe so. I think I got pictures of the building in its condition right now.
Yeah. Can you send me a picture of your father so I can put it for a thumbnail? People might want to see him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can send you a picture.
His what would you call it? Inscription. Or bio, so I can put it in there. Remember our own people for Black History, because it's approaching, and I even ran a thing on my page, Facebook, with my grandmother's diploma, 1920, and that was rare for a Black woman. So even though some of us haven't went where we should have went, we get there anyway because it's in us to learn, research, dig, and grow. So
most of us don't do any kind of reading or researching. Many of us don't. We don't study things. We don't check things because they gave us Black History Month. We shouldn't have to be given Black History Month. That should be something that should be embedded in our psyche, into our thinking. And even during Black History, even during those 28 days of Black History Month, we still don't get, the full scope of our history. Yeah. Most of the time in Black History Month, they only start from slavery on up to today. In order to study Black history, you're studying yourself, studying your history, and you have to go all the way back to the beginning to study Black history. And that goes all the way back to the beginning of time itself, from the first man on up to today. That's Black history.
Well,
they don't teach you that.
What about the first man? I thought the first man was actually a woman. Some woman's bones they found.
That's the furthest back they can go.
Mm-hmm.
Man has been here over 76 trillion years. That's the furthest back that they can trace the original man. The original man, the first man, was a Black man. They know this. But the archaeologists of today's society, European archaeologists, the furthest back they can find was a Black woman. And I think even Dr. Louis B. Leakey. I don't know if people are familiar with Louis Leakey. He was an archaeologist, and he found the bones of a woman in Africa that was 5 million years old, and she had a mother. She had parents. So that's just touching the surface of it, But if you want to go back to our history, you got to go back to God Himself.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions since we're going here, since we've taken this route deviation.
Not really a deviation.
Route deviation. You're a driver, so you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I wanted to know what you thought about the indigenous people. This it's been a lot of talk on the internet about that. The indigenous people of this land. There's a lot of talk about the Grand Canyon and all these different mounds and things that are built here.
Oh, like are you referring to like the pyramids that they find here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them they just brush off as mountains. Are they, or?
Well, I know for a fact that they found pyramids under the ocean off of the coast of Florida. Wow. I think it was on the Discovery Channel where they studied that. They found pyramid. Wherever the indigenous people of this land that they call America now, those are our red brothers. Those are our brothers. They're our family. And they came here thousands of years ago. They came across the Bering Straits up through Canada, up to that area where you can actually walk from one. You can walk here, and this land was given to them for them over here. Those are our brothers. They're our family. If you look at the artwork, if you look at the way they do things, they are actually our family, part of our family.
Okay.
The indigenous, they are the indigenous people here. The only reason they call them Indians, and the only reason they called them Indians because Christopher Columbus, who never discovered anything, thought he was in India. That's why he called them Indians.
What did they call them first? The Moors and the Moors, or what? What was that?
That I'm not exactly for sure of the term that they called themselves, but it was definitely not Indian. And that was the name that the Europeans who came here, and they gave them that name. So, just like they named everything else when they came in contact with people, they would give them whatever name that they felt before they conquered them.
Yeah, like Africa.
Yeah, Africa. That's not the original name of that continent either. Yeah.
Well, how did California get to be named California?
They just renamed. I mean, the Europeans renamed everything. Everywhere they went, they renamed it. Just like it's foolish for us to call ourselves African American. You were before Africa. You were before America. You can't be.
Do you feel like we are all connected though?
You're talking about us with the indigenous people and others.
Yeah, or is it 2 or 3 different species running around here?
No, we're all connected.
Okay.
Everything came from the original man. The original man is the black man. Everything came. All the cultures, all races came from the original man.
Hi, Amir Silly. Is this Amir Saeed back?
I'm sorry.
I wanted to. Somebody was speaking that said Amir Silly. I think it's Amir Saeed. But go ahead with what you were saying.
Oh, you say the question was where we are we all connected? Yeah, we're all connected.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about interracial relationships?
Is that interracial relation?
Yes.
Interracial relationship, I mean, that's neither here nor there. But I don't agree with it in the fact that we have to build ourselves up first.
But nothing
Until we
against
become,
them, right?
if someone wants to have an interracial relationship, that's to each his own. I don't agree because we're not uh, naturally supposed to be together in that way, shape, or form. The black man was meant for the black woman. That's how it originally was. So to go outside your culture, to go outside your, what was originally meant for you, you're really diminishing our culture. Because what you don't when you get into racial relationship, you don't just marry that person, you marry that culture.
This is true, especially if you're a woman.
Yeah, you're marrying onto their culture.
Yeah.
And most people that you find in interracial relationships, they don't be themselves anymore. You'll see it over time. You'll see it happens over time. They don't. They become other than what they should be.
They become one with someone or another person. They take on them
Right.
characteristics and those mannerisms,
Right.
that spirit, that aura, that whole being. That's why I take my time on a lot of things, and
Right.
I don't know. I see a lot of people in a hurry or not really looking at the spiritual aspect of linking up,
And a lot of people use the excuse, that well, I've had so many bad relationships with my own culture.
I'm
So
going over there.
So they seek, something else they think they're going to be happy with. So they end up losing themselves in order to find something else. What they're seeking, they lose themselves in order to seek something else that's not part of their nature.
Well, I had someone that was interracially married, and they weren't in my family. So, not talking about them, but they said that when Trump got in office, it ruined their marriage.
To ruin their marriage?
Yes, but that everything was fine before, and then they were living the dream. But maybe it was not. Maybe that's what it was. It wasn't the truth, because I don't see how that could have affected. I don't know. I just feel like I've never wanted to seek that out. Not that I didn't want to do things that were hard, but to me that was just something hard that I could avoid, you know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I guess I got all that. I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about?
Uh, Not that I can think of at the moment. There's many topics that can be talked about. We left off on Black History Month. Kind of got off track.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's get back to Minister Curtis Jackson. What's his name? His Muslim name. We want to remember him.
Yeah. His Minister Curtis X was his Curtis X Jackson, and then he changed it to he became an imam under that later after the Nation of Islam went into a transition.
Now tell me what the functions of an imam are.
Imam is just a religious leader, a Muslim religious leader. He's the head of the mosque, or you want to call it a masjid, but he's a religious figure, and he's the lead. He's just like a pastor, or in that respect, he's just like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you have imams. I mean, in the nation we call it ministers. He's still grown. But he was a minister before he was an imam, and before the work can be finished, you can't call yourself an imam until the work is finished, and the work that Imam had are far from being done. They're still in the making.
Yeah.
So there was a transition in 1975 where the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son had took over the leadership role of the Nation of Islam, and things had changed at that time, where they transformed from one step to another. They went in a different direction, and the foundation was lost. But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came back in to rebuild the nation, and to this day and time, 2026, the nation is the backbone of what I say, the backbone of Black history.
I say.
My father was a part of that. So.
So you're a part of it. You were born into it. It's a part of you in the conversation. I know that you do mention it, and I respect your walk. I saw you when you used to be out doing what you needed to do for your mission work, and that was really beautiful to see. I guess. Yeah. So, what happened with the youth program that you wanted to get started? Stop the violence, I think it was.
It's still in the making.
We need all of that, you know.
Yeah, it's still in the making. It's just that, every any kind of program, any kind of things that you do in life, they have different steps,
Yeah. Have you ever thought about collaborating with somebody like Brother D with Man Up?
Yeah, I talked to him. Yeah.
Because both of y'all, came through the same way. So
that's one thing we have to do in our community is work with other people who have the same ideas and who have the same goals. Yeah. And that's the problem. That's the problem with our community is we don't have any unity. Unity is one of the main things that we need to have.
Yeah. Okay, well, I thank you so much for your time, and I think I'll end this live right now. And thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome.
What about this thumbnail with your father's picture and the little short bio about him and the work he did in the mosque that he was over, because he was very influential in the early days of Islam in our community. I remember over in that area, and there was a lot of different activity on North Saginaw, with I guess different sects, but they had places that you could come in and buy food and different things.
You're referring to the deli?
Yeah.
Shabazz Deli. Shabazz Deli out on Saginaw Street.
Yeah, and then they had we called it the Muslim Bakery.
Was that the one on? Are we still on air?
Yes, I didn't push it.
I know we was on.
You want me to push the button? I'll end it now. But we used to call it Soul Fist because it was a big Soul Fist up there. But it was a Muslim guy, and he made the best peanut butter cookies.
We had a bakery on it's in Martin Luther King Street now, but it was up on Detroit Street.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're referring to?
That's the one.
Community Bakery.
Yes.
Yeah, Community Bakery. It's called Community Bakery. Yeah, we had many businesses here in Flint. Mm-hmm. Most Black-owned, Muslim-owned. We had the fish market, which was up on Carpenter Road. We even had a record store. A record store here.
What was the name of the record store?
That I'm not. I can't remember the name of it at this time. I don't know. But we had a record store. We had the bakery, and we had the fish coming in. We had the fish coming in that we used to sell. Mm-hmm. And we had the Muhammad Speaks newspaper. And we had a barbershop. The Mr. X's barbershop was up on Martin Luther King. We had many businesses here.
He cut my hair the first time. I got it all cut off.
Mr. X? Mm-hmm. It's called Mr. X Barbershop.
Yeah.
at that time.
I don't think he really agreed with cutting it all off though, but he did it. Yeah, he was good. He was really good.
Yeah, I used to go visit him all the time.
Yeah.
Up until his passing.
Yeah.
May God be pleased with him. But yeah, we had many conversations. I learned a lot. That was like, the barbershop was always like the meeting place,
Mm-hmm.
for men and women.
Yeah.
And it's like a think tank,
Right. Exactly.
people can have discussions and express themselves, and there was no arguing. And people learn from each other. So.
Well, I just want to know, Brother Jehan, is this a think tank?
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoy conversations that are substance and trying to make moves in our city because I feel like we on the way up.
Yeah, we are. We just have to have some unity. That's all.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing to achieve in most of all of our communities. We don't have any unity.
Yeah.
If we had some unity, we can achieve a lot more and be successful.
Well, when you get this youth program going, I'd like to give them some information on it and do whatever I can do to be of assistance to the work because the children are the future, and we don't have the programs that we had growing up, the teen clubs, the after school creative programs and stuff like that. So we have to make up for that.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is very true. The children are the future. So we just got to work on that and go from there.
That's it.